Welcome to MHS Midnight Horror Stories. If this is your first time visiting the channel, feel free to introduce yourself in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And now just relax. Get comfortable. Listen to tonight's horror stories. I am telling this story now that I am 30 years old. I hope that sharing this will finally bring me some peace, as I have kept it a secret for almost 20 years. Back then, my family seemed very happy. We lived in a 2-story house in Sacramento with a beautiful little yard. Everything was fine until I turned 11. That was when the nightmares started. Every single night, I would hear the sound of a woman crying in agony. Some nights, it was the sound of running footsteps or heavy thumping, followed by loud sobbing. Every time, I would wake up terrified and scream for my parents. They would both rush into my room immediately. Sometimes they would both stay and let me sleep between them. Other times, they would take turns. My parents told me they were just nightmares and that everything was okay. Aside from those night terrors, our lives seemed normal. Then, one afternoon, I came home from school to find 2 police cars parked in front of our house. The neighbors were standing in small groups, looking at our home with pity in their eyes. I ran inside, and my heart shattered when I saw my father. He was kneeling at the bottom of the stairs, sobbing. Next to him was a body lying motionless on the floor, covered by a white sheet. There was a lot of blood on the hardwood. I looked around, but I couldn't find my mother. I started crying and running through the house calling for her. My dad pulled me back and held me tight. He sobbed as he explained that my mom had fallen down the stairs and would never wake up again. I could only choke on my tears. The person under that sheet was my mother. I wanted to go to her and see her one last time, but my father wouldn't let me. My mother's funeral happened shortly after. My dad and I cried until we had nothing left. After that, our house felt like it was buried in darkness. My father became a completely different person. He spent almost all his time drowning his sorrows in alcohol. He stopped going to work and just sat in the living room, staring into space. But there was one strange thing. He was always clutching a light gray umbrella, the one my mother used when she was alive. I had to learn how to take care of myself and handle all the chores. I remember that my nightmares stopped, but I would still wake up with a start because of the sound of breaking glass whenever my dad was drunk. I missed my mom's cooking so much. I wished more than anything that she was still alive and here with us. One weekend, my dad was passed out drunk on the sofa while I was watching TV in the living room. It started to rain outside, and my dad suddenly bolted upright, looking incredibly excited. He stumbled over, grabbed the gray umbrella, and rushed out into the yard. I called out to him, but he didn't listen. In the middle of the pouring rain, my father started to dance. His movements were strangely graceful and fluid. He held the umbrella as if he were embracing an invisible person, looking up at the fabric with pure devotion. For the first time since my mom died, I saw my father smile. I ran out and tried to pull him back inside. He pushed me away, his eyes fixed on the umbrella. He kept dancing like that for hours. I stood there watching, feeling a mix of fear and confusion. When the rain finally stopped and evening fell, he finally came inside. He carefully wiped down the umbrella and went back to clutching it. The next day, it rained again. My father went back to the yard and danced for hours with that umbrella. After this happened several times, I realized it wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a strange, haunting obsession that he couldn't control. I became curious about that umbrella. What was it about it that made my father act this way? One time, I asked if I could use the umbrella. My father immediately flew into a rage and screamed at me, "Don't you ever touch it." He looked straight into my eyes and emphasized every single word. But an 11-year-old's curiosity is hard to suppress. One day, my dad drank too much and fell into a deep sleep on the sofa. His grip on the umbrella loosened. I crept toward him, quickly pulled the umbrella from his hand, and ran straight to the backyard. It wasn't raining that day. The sun was shining brightly. I stood in the middle of the yard holding the umbrella, my heart pounding. I had to know why my father loved this thing so much. I looked at the outside first. It was just a normal umbrella, and it was actually getting pretty old. I opened it up and looked at the inside. The bright sunlight shone through the fabric. I noticed that the inner lining looked a bit strange. At first, I thought it was just a special waterproof coating, but as I looked closer, my heart started racing. I saw strands of hair, then a forehead, and the bridge of a nose. It was like a magnet pulling me in. I stared even closer. The more I looked, the more familiar it became, and my hands began to shake. There was a mouth pulled into a distorted shape, and the eyes, they were wide open, looking right at me. I threw the umbrella onto the ground, screamed, and collapsed. My whole body wouldn't stop shaking, and I was gasping for air. I couldn't take my eyes off it. There was no mistake. It was my mother's face. I scrambled up, intending to go wake my father, but I was terrified he would be furious that I had stolen the umbrella. And yet, I wanted to scream at him and ask why my mother's face was inside of it. I lost all my strength and slumped down by the door, crying. I kept looking at the umbrella, then back at my sleeping father inside. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I was able to move. I made a choice. With shaking hands, I picked up the umbrella, trying my best not to look at the inside. I folded it up neatly, put it back in its spot next to my father, and quietly went to my room. I didn't sleep for many nights after that. My mental health went downhill, and I lost a lot of weight. 2 months later, I was sent to live with my grandmother in Oregon because the state ruled that my father was unfit to care for me. He was committed to a mental hospital, and I never saw him again. I developed severe psychological issues. I became completely withdrawn and never told anyone what I had seen. Even now, I am still trying to overcome that trauma. Looking back at age 30, I realized those nightmares I had at age 11 were all real. The crying was my mother. The footsteps were her trying to run away from my father. Her death wasn't an accident. I believe my father pushed her down those stairs. Maybe it was an accident in the heat of the moment, because I could feel how much he suffered afterward, and the way he cherished that umbrella with her face on it. I think he missed her terribly too. I don't know the full story of what happened that night. Honestly, I don't want to know anymore. I just hope my mother is finally at peace, and I hope that no other child ever has to go through what I did. My name is Joey. I've been a cop in this town of Llano, Texas for 12 years. I've seen some heavy things, but nothing haunts me more than the look in a 7-year-old girl's eyes. It was a weekend night, and the call came into dispatch at 9 p.m. A little girl's voice was shaking. She said, "My mommy says I'm going to stop breathing soon." My partner and I were in our patrol car nearby. We took the call immediately. While driving, I read the info from dispatch. The house belonged to Judith, 36. She was a single mom with a 7-year-old daughter named Carrie. We pulled up to a small house. A woman opened the door. Her face was flushed. She smelled strongly of booze, and her attitude was like a loaded gun. That was Judith. She didn't ask why we were there. She just started screaming. I didn't do anything wrong. She's making it up. She's just throwing a tantrum. I ignored her. I looked inside and saw a little girl hiding behind the sofa. She was clutching a small brown dog. Both of them were shivering. That was Carrie. Judith kept yelling and fighting every question we asked. Carrie just stood there, staring at us with terrified eyes. I decided I had to get that little girl away from her mother right then. I led Carrie and the dog to the patrol car while my partner dealt with Judith. As soon as she saw the dog, Bella, being taken, Judith lost it. You can't touch my dog. Bella's mine. Give her back right now. She didn't say a single word about her daughter. She only cared about the dog. My partner had to hold the mother back while I put Carrie in the car. The weather was pretty cold, so I turned the heater on for her. Inside the car, she sat in silence and stared at me for a long time. I could see bruises on her neck and small scratches on her arms. Then Carrie whispered, "Can Bella stay in the car too? She's scared of the cold." I nodded immediately. Once she was holding Bella, she relaxed a little and started talking. She told me that yesterday, her mom covered her mouth and told her she would stop breathing. She said her mom hated her. She told her she never wanted her in this world. Her voice was strangely calm. Her eyes were red, but she didn't cry. Carrie also said she didn't get dinner last night. She was starving, but she still had to sit and do her math homework. Then she looked down at the floor and whispered, "What did I do wrong that makes Mommy not love me?" I sat there in silence. I didn't know how to answer that. I watched her face and her eyes as she told her story. I watched how she petted Bella. She was such a warm, strong little girl. Outside, things were getting worse. Judith suddenly grabbed her chest and fell onto the porch. She screamed that she was having a heart attack and couldn't breathe. My partner called an ambulance right away, but when the paramedics arrived, she stood up like nothing happened. She brushed off her shirt and told them they weren't needed. She said it was all a misunderstanding. When we told Judith she was under arrest, her true face came out. She fought us hard. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. She kept calling us trash and saying we were ruining her family. While my partner was trying to cuff her, she intentionally turned and grabbed him in a private area. It didn't stop there. When we led her to the police car, she spat right in my face. We had to put a spit mask on her. Judith was taken to the station on charges of child endangerment and assaulting a police officer. I knew the legal process would take a long time, but at least Carrie was safe for the night. When things calmed down, I went back to the car. Carrie was still sitting there, holding Bella and looking out the window. "Can you take me to Aunt Gigi's house? She loves me. She has cookies, and Bella likes it there too." I said yes. All the way there, Carrie sat next to me, still holding Bella tight. Sometimes she would whisper to the dog, trying to comfort her little friend. After a while, they both went quiet. I glanced over and saw Carrie leaning her head back against the seat, staring out the window. I wondered how a 7-year-old could be so calm after everything that happened. After about a 40-minute drive, we reached her aunt's house. Gigi hugged Carrie so gently and asked if she was okay. When she saw the bruises on Carrie's body, Gigi started crying. I felt a weight lift off my chest. She was safe. I got back to the station after midnight. I spent the rest of my shift writing the report, but my mind kept going back to Carrie holding Bella, and her question kept ringing in my head. What did I do wrong that makes Mommy not love me? Months later, I heard that Carrie was doing great living with Aunt Gigi. She goes to school, joined an art club, and most importantly, she is happy and energetic. The court officially gave custody to Aunt Gigi after deciding Judith was unfit to be a mother. She is serving her sentence and facing years of rehabilitation. Even though I was just a small part of Carrie's story, I am grateful I was there that night. I hope Carrie never has to ask why she isn't loved ever again. And for all the other children out there, I hope you get to grow up with love, safety, and a real childhood. Sometimes, the scariest thing at a convenience store in the middle of the night isn't the silence, but the certain feeling that no one sees you. Last October, I had just moved to Austin for college. Earning money to pay tuition wasn't easy, so I got the graveyard shift at the 7-Eleven on Guadalupe Street. On Halloween night that year, I was working from 10 p.m. until morning with Jake, another clerk. Jake had been with the store for almost 3 years. He's a funny, talkative guy, but that night he was unusually quiet. I figured maybe the Halloween atmosphere made everyone a little somber. Around midnight, while we were stocking shelves, the doorbell chimed. A middle-aged man walked in. He went straight to the soda section, grabbed a cola and a bag of candy. As he passed the counter, he stopped and looked around. "It's freezing in here," he said to us. "Feels like a morgue." I offered a small laugh and nodded. "Maybe the AC is broken." We called to get it fixed. Actually, the air conditioner was working fine, but I also felt a strange chill covering the whole store. I thought maybe it was just the Halloween mind game. As Jake was ringing up the man, I looked out the window and saw 2 figures standing under the streetlight. A couple, a man and a woman. The girl was wearing a red dress with long blonde hair. The guy had on a black leather jacket. They stood still, like statues, staring right into the store. There was something about them that felt familiar. Their faces, the way they stood, the way they looked inside. But I couldn't place where I'd met them. They started moving, but they didn't walk normally. Their feet seemed to slide without touching the ground. The couple moved closer to the window. The light from inside the store illuminated their faces. That's when I noticed their eyes were entirely black. No whites, no pupils. "Hey, do you see?" I turned to ask Jake. But Jake was giving the customer his change, completely unaware of the outside. Suddenly, the unbelievable happened. The couple outside started to merge. Their bodies melted and combined into one massive black mass. That black mass distorted, growing horns and sharp claws. I stood frozen in place. No way, what was happening couldn't be real. The creature lunged straight at the glass door, but instead of shattering the glass, it passed right through it, as if the door were just a curtain of fog. I wanted to scream a warning, but my throat was completely constricted. The monster rushed right toward the man standing at the counter. I clearly saw its claws tear through his chest, but the man only flinched, then looked around, confused. "Is everything all right?" Jake asked the man. He took his change, quickly pocketed it, and rushed out of the store. He glanced back once with a look of fear before leaving. The demon still stood there, right in front of Jake. It stared, but did nothing. I used all my strength to scream a warning, but Jake just stood motionless, staring straight ahead, as if he didn't see anything. Suddenly, the demon turned its head and looked at me. I felt like my soul was being sucked into its pitch-black eyes. No longer caring about anyone else, I turned and ran straight into the stockroom behind the store. I locked the door, leaned against the wall, and gasped for breath. Panicked, I looked around, desperately searching for anything to defend myself. I looked up at the small mirror hanging on the wall. That's when I saw the truth. In the mirror, my face was pale, and there was a deep wound on my neck. Blood was dry and congealed around the injury. Stunned, I slowly approached the mirror and touched the wound on my neck. The memory came rushing back. Halloween night last year, I was working the night shift with Jake. I was standing at the register, and he was in the stockroom. That couple was the one that walked in to make a purchase that day. While I was ringing them up, a runaway truck crashed right through the glass window. Everything happened so fast. None of us survived. Now I understood why no one answered me. understood why the man said the place was cold to the bone, because we were dead, and my soul was trapped here, right where my life ended. I don't know how much longer I'll have to stay. I only know that, from now on, nothing will ever be the same. I am Brian, an ordinary office worker, living alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of Minnesota. My apartment is on the second floor of an old apartment building. It's nothing special, but it provides comfort after long, tiring work hours. My life was very peaceful until a week ago, when an event changed everything. That day, I came home after work, hoping to relax in front of the TV, watch my favorite show, and have some snacks. It was the time of day I looked forward to the most. But the first thing I saw was the front door forced open, the hinge almost completely broken. My apartment was in chaos. The most valuable items were gone, including my favorite TV. I sat down heavily on the chair, overwhelmed with shock and anger. I had worked hard to buy those things, and now they were gone, as if they had never existed. I immediately called the police and reported the incident. They came, took notes, and advised me that the chances of recovering my belongings were very low. I feel powerless, but try to accept reality. I didn't want the house to remain empty, so I decided to buy a new TV. I turned to Craigslist, where I used to shop for cheap second-hand items. I spent the whole evening scrolling through a series of posts until an ad made me stop. The TV being sold was identical to the one I had just lost, from the size, brand, to the small scratch on the bottom right corner. What was even stranger was that the price was very low and the address was not far from where I live. A strange feeling arose in me, half doubt, half curiosity. The next morning, I contacted the seller and arranged to meet. The house was located in a remote area, with only a few scattered houses around, and the rest was forest. A cold atmosphere enveloped the area, and sunlight struggled to penetrate through the dense tree canopy. When I arrived, a man in his 40s opened the door. He was tall and thin, with messy hair, and his sharp eyes stared at me as if assessing every movement. I stepped in, and the TV was placed right in the middle of the living room. My heart raced as I noticed the distinctive scratch on the corner of the TV. It was exactly mine. I tried to remain calm, pretending to examine it. He took me on a tour of the house, pointing out a few other items he wanted to sell. But the more I looked, the more stunned I became. The black Bluetooth speaker, the antique clock, and even my collection of movie DVDs were all there. I felt a surge of anger, but unease held back my impulse. I made an excuse to leave, but just as I was about to head for the door, the man suddenly stood in my way. He pulled a gun from his belt, his cold eyes seeming to pierce through me. He snarled a warning not to come back or tell anyone what I had seen. My whole body froze, and cold sweat poured down. I nodded, trying to leave without showing the fear that was drowning me. Once home, I immediately called the police. I told them everything, but they said they needed more time to gather evidence before executing a search warrant. I spent the whole day worried, not taking my eyes off the window and checking the door latch multiple times. The feeling of being threatened haunted me, but there was nothing I could do except wait. That night, the silence was so deep that I could hear the wind whistling through the crack in the door. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the kitchen window. I turned off the lights, tried to stay silent, and moved toward the source of the sound. In the dim light from the street lamp, I saw a figure trying to pry open the window. It was the man who sold the TV. In his hand gleamed the steel of a large knife. My heart was pounding, and my body felt frozen. I quickly hid behind the sofa and pulled out my phone to call 911. My voice trembled as I tried to stay calm, not wanting to be detected. Meanwhile, the sound of breaking glass echoed. He had entered the house. I could hear his heavy footsteps getting closer, each step pounding like a blow to my chest. The sound of the knife scraping against the glass table echoed, screeching in a chilling manner. I held my breath, not daring to move, but just at that moment, The sound of police sirens echoed outside. The man panicked, turning and running toward the window. But as soon as he jumped into the yard, the police had surrounded him. I collapsed, my whole body trembling uncontrollably. The police reassured me and led me out of the house. The man was handcuffed, his eyes filled with rage and madness. Even so, I felt a sense of relief knowing that he would no longer have the chance to threaten me or anyone else. The next day, I received a notification from the police that they had found all the stolen items in his house, including my TV. I breathed a sigh of relief, but that terrible night haunted me forever. Since then, I have never dared to use Craigslist again and always remind myself that safety is more important than any item. Around the spring of 2021, I started learning about the cryptocurrency Luna and the crypto market in general. In May 2021, a friend in the scene gave me a heads up. He told me that Luna, a crypto coin, had skyrocketed from 50 cents to $6 per token just a few months earlier. I did some research and learned that Luna was a reserve asset for Terra USD. This was an algorithmic stablecoin designed to stay at a 1-to-1 ratio with the US dollar. Basically, Terra USD was backed by tons of investors pouring millions into the company that created it, making it seem like a stable coin that couldn't possibly fail. Luna was the asset whose price could fluctuate, but because it was tied to Terra USD, it was practically guaranteed to increase in value over time. My friend waited for a small dip and bought into Luna at $5 per token. Just over a month later, that token price had more than quadrupled to $20.71. After a period of stability, Luna took a small hit, dropping to about $5 in May 2021. This was when my friend messaged me, saying it was the perfect time to buy in. He was practically 99% confident that Luna would recover strongly because of its link to Terra USD. His confidence is what convinced me, and I joked, if it crashes, we crash together. I had a total of $490 saved up, and I bought 100 Luna tokens at $4.81 each. My girlfriend at the time and my best friend Chris both thought I was insane for spending almost $500 on invisible coins. But then they slowly started to change their minds when, by August of the same year, Luna's value had climbed from $10 to $20, then $30 per token. This was especially true for Chris. I opened my crypto wallet on the investment app and showed Chris the amount of Luna I owned and their current value. When he saw how much the investment had grown, Chris curiously asked if I could convert that money to cash anytime I wanted. I explained that technically, I needed to sell those Luna tokens to another buyer in the market. However, with Luna's price surging, finding a buyer was easy, and the app I used could automatically execute the sale and transfer the money to my bank account quickly. I even had the chance to make $2,900 in profit in less than an hour. Chris went from thinking this was a scam to seeing the potential of crypto. I was honest that it was basically gambling, but Luna was the safest bet at the time, with long-term stability potential. For the rest of 2021, Luna's value kept rising, going from $30 to $60, then $93. I always advised Chris to follow the market, understand the system, and patiently wait for a dip so he could buy in. In late January 2022, Luna dropped sharply to about $45 per token. I called Chris and told him it was the perfect time. I guided him through setting up a wallet, and Chris decided to buy 300 tokens. I was a little shocked because I had only invested $4,000, while Chris, who wasn't wealthy, invested almost $14,000. Just over a month later, Luna had risen from around $50 to over $100 per token, and we believed Chris had made the right choice. Chris's investment was now worth almost $30,000, double his original money. By early April 2022, Luna hit almost $120 per token, and Chris believed we would be millionaires by the end of the year. I tried to pull Chris back to reality, saying I planned to sell my tokens as soon as they hit the $150 mark to lock in a massive profit. If Chris did the same, he would triple his investment. Chris was thrilled, thinking he would get rich because of Luna. I felt proud that I had not only made money, but also helped my best friend. Just a few days after our conversation, Luna started to fall sharply. In about 2 weeks, the price dropped from $120 to around $75 per token. Chris called me, and I reassured him with my usual line, "Every drop is just taking a breather before a new high." Sure enough, the next day, Luna rose from $75 to $90, then stabilized at around $95. In early May 2022, I remember checking my wallet once and saw Luna had dropped below $70, but I wasn't worried, believing it would soon bounce back as usual. Everything became a blur after that. May 11th, 2022 is a day that will forever be etched in my mind. I realized my whole world had been completely turned upside down. In just about an hour, Luna had plummeted from almost $70 to $33 per token. A few hours later, it sank to $16 and then to $13. At that point, my head was spinning. I had to take deep breaths to keep myself from throwing up or passing out. I immediately checked forums and message boards for clues. I prayed it was just a glitch or a miscalculation in the blockchain, but I found the opposite. Luna had completely collapsed and wasn't coming back. When I woke up the next day, my phone had about 50 missed calls and nearly 24 messages from Chris. He was in full-blown panic mode. His messages escalated from, "Did you see this?" to "Pick up the phone, you jerk." I called him back, but the call went to voicemail. About 20 minutes later, Chris rang the buzzer to my apartment. When I looked at the monitor screen, I saw Chris looked almost exhausted, not angry. I planned to let him in, make Chris a cup of coffee, and knew we were about to have an incredibly tense conversation. However, as I was about to open the door, Chris punched the door and hissed, "Open up." His voice was slurred like he was drunk. I suddenly felt a chill, afraid that a drunk Chris would smash up my apartment. He punched the door hard again and yelled, "Open this damn door, we need to talk." I spoke through the intercom, suggesting he go home and sleep it off. Then we could talk on the phone in the morning. I even offered to call him an Uber as an apology for not answering his calls. While I was explaining that I was sick, Chris started kicking the door repeatedly, each kick getting stronger. He screamed in a drunken rage that he would kill me when he broke the door down. I tried to explain why Luna collapsed, but he didn't care anymore and kept screaming. He repeated over and over, "Open the door, James. Open the door." I was afraid I might have to use violence to defend myself against a close friend. I knew I should call the police, but couldn't do that to him. "Please, man, let's talk when you've really calmed down." Chris only stopped when my neighbor shouted at him to quit it. I saw Chris raise his hands in the air and back away from the door. I assumed the neighbor had a gun pointed at him. Chris then stumbled away. The next day, I tried calling and texting Chris, but he didn't answer. I reached out on Instagram, and he had blocked me. I asked a mutual friend to pass along a message, but there was no response. I thought he would be mad for a week or two at most, because sooner or later, he had to realize it wasn't my fault. But the heartbreaking thing is, that never happened. From Chris's point of view, I was either too stupid and cost him his money, or I was part of a scam and stole his money. Either way, he was done with me. That night he screamed behind that locked door was the last time we ever spoke. I didn't throw away a laptop holding nearly $1 billion, but I threw away a friendship, and that friendship was worth more than any amount of money could buy. I'm Percy, I'm 27, and I live in the suburbs of Florida. I grew up in a pretty normal family where life was simple and chill. I used to work at this small bookstore, loved the chill vibes, and all the colorful stories in the novels. My life was pretty uneventful until I met Henry, who I thought was the perfect love of my life. I met Henry at a good friend's birthday party. He looked like he walked straight out of a rom-com. Tall, deep blue eyes, a killer smile, and all the confidence. On top of that, Henry was thoughtful, always noticing the little things that made me feel special. He caught every little thing that made me smile, like pouring me a glass of wine or asking about my favorite book. At the start of our relationship, everything was awesome. Henry made me feel secure and valued. He took care of me, doing little things to make me happy, like remembering my favorite foods or surprising me with gifts. But it wasn't long before the first cracks started to show in the relationship. Henry had this way of showing his love that was a little too intense, sometimes crossing the line and making me feel uncomfortable. His handshakes, which seemed gentle, were so tight they left red marks on my skin. His hugs sometimes felt like they were suffocating me. I tried telling Henry that he hurt me, but every time I did, he'd snap, and I could see the anger and annoyance in his eyes. Henry's actions started getting more and more controlling. He wanted to know everything about me, where I went, who I hung out with, and what I was doing every second of the day. My phone wasn't private anymore because he was always checking my messages and calls. Anyone who talked to me up close made him insanely jealous for no reason. One time, he ripped up my favorite notebook just because it had the name of an old friend I mentioned in it. That control wasn't love anymore. It felt like an invisible cage trapping me. I started to feel suffocated, stuck, and hopeless. When I brought up breaking up, Henry seemed like a totally different person. He started smashing things and yelling like crazy. All I could do was hide, like a scared little puppy afraid of the noise. Henry's rages made me start fearing the guy I used to love. Everything hit the fan one November evening. It was a chilly day in Florida, and I was in the kitchen getting dinner ready. The smell of roast chicken filled the whole house. Out of nowhere, I heard some mumbling from outside, followed by a loud, panicked scream. My heart tightened, and this weird, uneasy feeling started creeping up on me. I quickly washed my hands, ran to the door, and yelled for Henry. Before I could even step outside, what I saw made my body freeze up completely. Henry was kneeling, hunched over someone else's lifeless body. The other person's face was all messed up, with the skin torn open and showing patches of red, slimy flesh. Henry, his mouthpieces of flesh were falling from his blood-stained teeth. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight, and all I could do was gasp for air. My eyes went wide, my ears were ringing, and the horrifying scene in front of me was burned into my mind. Henry turned to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot and completely empty of any humanity. His mouth was still chewing on a piece of flesh, with red drops dripping down. Police sirens sounded outside, along with the terrified screams of several neighbors. I heard a man shout, "Police! Over here! It's him!" The police quickly restrained Henry. He struggled and screamed like a cornered animal. I couldn't move, and 2 medics helped me into the ambulance and took off. In the following days, the truth was gradually revealed under police investigation. Henry grew up in an abusive home, dealing with his dad's irrational rage and alcohol-fueled outbursts. He had to live with control and violence, and those scars turned Henry into a guy who couldn't control himself. The police said he had a history of mental illness but kept it all hidden when we started dating. I left Florida, carrying the trauma with me, knowing it would take years to get over. I cried a lot thinking about everything, mourning for a soul that had been broken by the wounds of the past. I always wondered if Henry had gotten the love and help he needed sooner, would things have turned out differently? Some childhood memories are ones you want to forget, but you can't. For me, that memory is Halloween night when I was 11 years old. On that Halloween night, my best friend Lily and I were trick-or-treating together. We were neighbors and did almost everything together, including dressing up in identical skeleton costumes for Halloween. Our parents gave us a simple rule. We couldn't leave our neighborhood and we had to be home before 8 p.m. Knowing we had a time limit, we tried to visit as many houses as possible. Both of our candy bags became significantly heavier, and we were so proud of the amount of candy we had collected. Overjoyed with our success, I was walking and counting my candy. Suddenly, I was pushed onto the cement sidewalk. I remember that my knee even started to bleed. I was in so much pain that I was about to cry. I looked around and saw a person in a gorilla costume zoom past me. They were running at full speed down the street. Lily yelled that he was a jerk and tried to help me get up. I told her I was fine, just a little shocked. We watched the man in the gorilla suit fly down the street, running as if he was trying to escape from something. We picked up our dropped candy and were talking about how much of a jerk that guy was when we heard sirens in the distance. At the time, we didn't connect the two things, but it wasn't long before everything became clear. About 5 minutes later, my mom called. She was panicked and told us to come home immediately and not to ask any questions. When we got home, with our Halloween candy bags still full, but now we had lost interest, my mother led us into the living room. Her face was tense and worried. The television was on and tuned to the news. The news anchor was explaining that a young man who had attended a Halloween party was now the prime suspect in a murder case. He had entered the house where the Halloween party was taking place and found his girlfriend cheating on him. The young man had lost his temper and committed a knife attack. He had murdered 3 people: his girlfriend, the man she was cheating on, and the homeowner. When the anchor said he showed up to the party in a gorilla costume, my mind was dazed for a few seconds. He was now on the run and was very dangerous. That's when everything connected. The man in the gorilla suit who pushed me and the sirens in the distance were linked. I looked at Lily. Her face was pale, her eyes were wide, and her hands were shaking as she took mine. We both understood what had just happened. I remembered the feeling of being pushed by him, the musty smell of sweat from the gorilla suit, and the brief glance of madness I saw through the mask's eye holes. I now understood why he was running like that. I didn't tell my mom. She was worried enough. If she knew that her daughter had encountered a murderer, she would have been even more of a wreck than I was. We just sat in silence, holding hands as a way to comfort each other. This is something we have kept a secret to ourselves until now. Anyway, they caught the guy, and he's serving a life sentence. Many years have passed, but I still can't forget that moment. A simple push became a Halloween nightmare when I was 11, but what helped me get through it wasn't just time, it was Lily's hand holding mine. That memory reminds me that even in the scariest moments, true friendship can be the light that helps you stand strong.
I'm Oscar, and the creepy stuff I went through was like 15 years back. Back then, unlike most guys my age, I was pretty shy and kept to myself. When I was a kid, I didn't hang around or anything, just stayed home, watched TV, and read stories. When I got older, like in high school, I was still pretty quiet. I didn't cause trouble, but I wasn't killing it in school or great at any subject either. Back then, my buddies were all flexing with their girlfriends, while I was just showing off the skills I leveled up in my game. There wasn't much to say since everyone was into their own stuff. But I was the only one up front, so those group hangouts made me feel totally out of place. I got self-conscious about how I talked, especially if I was talking to a girl. There were a couple of girls in school who'd come up to me, but after like 3 sentences, they'd bounce. I only felt confident in my skills when I was gaming, so I started spending more and more time on it. And then, I met my first crush in the game. Her name was Casey, or at least, that's what I figured from her game tag. Funny enough, both Casey and I lived in New York. After a few times of being on the same team, I noticed Casey, but I wasn't really looking to get to know her. Then, out of nowhere, she hit me up first. Casey's way of talking was pretty hilarious, had me laughing all the time. I figured she was around my age, just a guess though. Didn't want to ask anything too personal. We talked a lot about our shared love for gaming, and slowly started chatting about life and feelings too. Talking to Casey made my heart feel tired, because it just wouldn't stop racing. Every day, I couldn't wait for game time, and seeing Casey's name online would have me grinning like an idiot. After we'd been chatting for like 2 weeks, Casey just suddenly dropped that she liked me, and I sat there staring at her messages for like 10 minutes, totally shocked. So, I had a girlfriend and was all proud, showing her off to my friends. They were doubting it and told me to bring Casey to the next hangout. Before I could even bring it up to Casey, she was the one who suggested we meet. Casey's always like that. Her being so upfront and taking the lead totally surprised and made me happy. Casey wanted to hang at my place, just the two of us, and only in the evening when no one else was around. I said yes to Casey, but I was low-key stressing about how to tell my parents and brother. But fate really hooked me up and made it easy to meet my first love. My parents said they were going to a party at a friend's place, and my brother and his crew were heading out for the night. I was hyped and texted Casey, and we set a time to meet up. To be all suave, I offered to pick Casey up, but she turned me down and told me to just wait at home for a surprise. I sent Casey my address and got everything ready for our first date. I cleaned up my room, threw on a nice suit, and secretly used my brother's hair wax and cologne. My phone buzzed with a message, and I grabbed it quick to check out Casey's profile pic. "I'm outside your house." My heart started racing. My hands and feet were sweating, and I was so freaked out I totally forgot to open the door. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and no one was there. I stood there for a minute, ran to the gate to check around, then ran back inside to grab my phone and text Casey again. She said she messed up the address and would be over in a sec. I ran to the bathroom, fixed myself up, then plopped down in the living room to wait. I couldn't sit still, kept wringing my shirt, and then the door knocked again. This time, I rushed over like crazy and threw open the door. What I saw made me freeze. A fat guy with messy clothes and hair was just standing there grinning at me. "You need help?" I said, all confused. "Hey, Oscar, it's Casey." The guy grinned big, eyes wide open. I froze when he said his name, Casey. Before I could even react, he stepped up, shoved his arm against the door, and wouldn't let me close it. I ran inside, grabbed my phone, bolted to my room, locked the door, and shaking, dialed the cops. He was outside, knocking on the door like non-stop, calling my name real soft. Didn't yell or anything. Each knock made my whole body freeze up, and I covered my ears in both hands till it hurt. The fear had me, a 14-year-old, crying like a little kid, even though I was in my own house. The cops showed up, and the guy was gone, along with some small stuff from the living room. My parents and brother came back soon after, and they totally freaked out when they saw the house and how out of it I looked. After more than 3 days of looking, the cops finally caught Casey, but I couldn't bring myself to face him. I didn't even dare to tell anyone how stupid I was for giving a stranger my address and personal info. It was so embarrassing, thinking I had feelings for a freak for almost a month. Definitely a lesson in being careful that I'll never forget.
I am Philip, 34 years old, and my wife Jessica, 38 years old. We have a stable life in the suburbs of Massachusetts. My wife and I have been married for 12 years and have waited 5 years to welcome a little angel. Finally, the miracle happened. My wife is pregnant. When we found out, we cried and hugged each other like two children. I promised Jessica that I would throw the biggest gender reveal party she had ever seen. A party to make up for the waiting and pain we had endured. Jessica and our child deserved that. I spent 3 months planning everything. Our backyard was decorated with string lights and balloons. The food was prepared by a private chef. There was expensive wine and a 5-tiered cake. And the highlight was a small plane that would fly overhead and release either pink or blue smoke, announcing to the world whether we were having a son or a daughter. No one knew the color of the smoke in advance. The doctor had sent me the results in a sealed envelope, and I passed it on to the event company. I wanted my reaction at that moment to be real. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. There was something about the dream that woke me up sweating and gasping for breath. I couldn't remember what it was, just fragments of images, distant sounds, and a terrible feeling that something was wrong. Jessica said it was just the nerves of soon-to-be fatherhood. Maybe she was right. The day of the party, everything started perfectly. The weather was ideal, with a clear sky, not a cloud in sight. Nearly 100 guests, including friends, partners, and family, gathered in our backyard. My mother flew in from California, and Jessica's sister came from London with her 2 kids. Some college friends, whom we hadn't seen in years, were also here, all sharing our happiness. I looked at Jessica in her long white dress, her belly protruding, her face radiant. She looked amazing. I felt incredibly lucky and grateful to God for this happiness we had found. The party started at 3 p.m. Laughter and joy were evident on everyone's face. As the exciting moment drew near, everyone started looking up at the sky. I could feel the excitement in the air. Jessica held my hand tightly, her fingers cold and trembling. 1 minute to go, the event coordinator announced. Everyone started counting down, and Jessica hugged me tightly. I could feel our baby kicking lightly, as if it too was excited. Then I heard the sound of the plane engine in the distance. Everyone cheered as the small plane appeared in the sky, heading toward us. My heart raced for the moment we had waited so long for. But as the plane got closer, I felt that something was wrong. It was flying much lower than planned, and it seemed to be struggling. The engine was louder, at times stuttering, at others roaring. Before I could finish my sentence, there was a small explosion from the plane. People gasped. Then smoke started pouring out. Not pink or blue, but thick, dark smoke. The plane swayed in the air, clearly in trouble. "Everyone move back," I shouted, pulling Jessica into the house. But most of the guests stood there, mesmerized by the scene in the sky. In a terrible moment, the plane seemed to stop in midair. Then, from below, something began falling. Black objects rained down into the yard. I squinted, trying to make sense of it in the dark, and then realized the horrifying truth. It was pieces of flesh, dozens, maybe hundreds of pieces. Then came fingers, toes, pieces of darkened skin from decomposition, and hair, long strands still attached to scalp fragments. The first scream rang out. Then everyone screamed.
Panic took over. People scattered, trying to escape the horrendous shower falling from the sky. I pulled Jessica inside, slamming the back door behind us. She was trembling violently, holding her belly to protect our unborn child. Through the window, I could see the backyard now looking like a scene from a horror movie. Body parts scattered across the grass, stuck to the white tables and pastel-colored balloons. The police arrived within 15 minutes. They cordoned off the area and began their investigation. Our guests were taken for medical checks and interrogations. Jessica had to be hospitalized due to shock. I stayed at the scene, trying to make sense of what had happened. The answer came at midnight when an FBI agent pulled me aside. "Mr. Lawson, we've identified the origin of the objects that fell from the plane. It appears they were bodies from a graveyard in Maine. About a month ago, there were reports of grave robberies there, but we never thought, who did this? We found a letter in the pilot's cabin. He had committed suicide after dropping those things. The letter was addressed to you." "To me? Why? Do you know someone named Thomas Caldwell?" My heart skipped a beat. My mind spun, and my ears rang after hearing that name. No one knew that before Jessica, I had deeply loved a man named Thomas Caldwell. We met in our sophomore year of college. Thomas was an excellent literature student, and we spent 3 years together. But when we graduated, I faced pressure from my family, especially my conservative father. I was accepted into law school, and at a celebratory party, I met Jessica. She was beautiful, smart, and represented everything my family wanted. I found myself wavering, and after many sleepless nights of thinking, I chose the easier path. The way I broke up with Thomas was horrible. I didn't have the courage to tell him the truth, that I had chosen a life that met my family's expectations instead of true love. In the following months, Thomas began sending letters and messages. At first, they were pleading, then they turned to anger, and eventually to threats. He showed up at my law office, sent flowers to Jessica's house with strange notes. I had to get a restraining order, and then Thomas disappeared. 12 years passed with no sign of Thomas, and I buried my fears and guilt deep within me. I built a new life with Jessica, focused on my career and marriage, and gradually convinced myself that I was happy with my choice. But on those rare sleepless nights, Thomas's face would still haunt me. Jessica never knew the whole truth. I couldn't let her know it was my fault, that the terror we had endured was due to my past. Today, our daughter turns 1 year old. Our family has moved to a town over 600 miles away from our old home. We named our daughter Hope. Jessica still wakes up at night from nightmares. I've never told her everything. I can't. Instead, I bear the fear alone. That's my punishment, the price I have to pay for the lies and the secrets.
I'm Henry, a delivery driver for UPS. It was a normal workday, but then everything changed in the blink of an eye. The UPS watch on my wrist read 6:30 p.m. as I drove through a deserted area outside Harrisonville. Only 1 hour left until the end of my shift. I was daydreaming about the warm dinner waiting for me when I noticed a black car parked on the side of the road ahead. Someone was waving at me. I slowed down, thinking they needed help. A man wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses approached me. Something wasn't right. His hand revealed a large knife. "Get out of the car," he ordered, his voice ice cold. My throat tightened, as if someone was squeezing it. I slowly opened the door and stepped out, my hands raised and trembling. "Wallet, phone, everything," he yelled. Cold sweat ran down my back as I pulled the items from my pants pocket. He snatched them, checked them quickly, and stuffed them into his pocket. Then he pushed me away and jumped into my UPS truck. I stood helplessly watching the truck full of packages speed away. I looked around. The road was deserted. only dry, yellowing cornfields under the fiery red sunset. I heard an engine. A pickup truck was approaching. I stood in the middle of the road, waving frantically. The truck slowed down. "What's wrong, buddy?" A middle-aged man with a thick beard and deep-set eyes asked through the lowered window. "I just got my UPS truck stolen. I need to get to the nearest police station," I said, my voice still shaking. The man looked at me intently, then nodded. "Get in. I'll take you there." I opened the door and climbed in, the smell of cigarettes and beer hitting my nose. "Thank you so much, sir." "I'm Ray," he introduced himself. "Henry," I replied, still reeling from the robbery. Ray nodded and drove off. After a few minutes, I realized we weren't going towards town, but away from any residential areas. My heart started to pound. "Sir, the police station is in the opposite direction," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Ray didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I can get out here. I'll walk," I suggested, a feeling of anxiety rising. Ray finally turned to look at me, a cold smile spreading across his lips. Before I could react, he pulled a handgun from under his seat. "Don't move," Ray ordered, pointing the gun at me. My throat went dry. For the second time that day, I was being held against my will. But this time was worse. Ray swerved onto a dirt road, leading into a dense forest. After about 10 minutes, we arrived at an old wooden cabin deep in the woods. Ray motioned for me to get out and shoved me into the cabin, the gun barrel digging into my back. The cabin was dilapidated with old furniture and trash scattered everywhere. Ray pushed me down onto a rickety wooden chair. "You don't have anything to steal," Ray said, his voice full of disappointment. "I just got robbed," I repeated. Ray sneered. "Let me think of another way to extract value from you." He rummaged through a cupboard and pulled out a roll of rope. Images of death suddenly became clear. I knew this was the time to act. As Ray approached me with the rope, I stood up abruptly and forcefully kicked the chair towards him. Ray stumbled backward. I lunged for the door, but Ray was faster than I thought. He grabbed my collar, pulling me down to the floor. Pain shot through me as my back hit the hard wooden floor. Ray kicked me hard in the ribs. I curled up, trying to protect my head and vital organs. After a series of blows, Ray stopped. I lay there, curled in a ball, gasping for breath. Every part of my body ached. "I'll figure out what to do with you next," Ray said, and left for another room. Despite the pain, I knew I couldn't die here. Images of my family flashed before my eyes, giving me strength. I slowly got to my feet, trying not to make any noise. On a nearby table, I saw an empty beer bottle. I reached for it and gripped it tightly in my hand. There were footsteps. Ray was coming back. I quickly lay down, pretending to still be unconscious, the beer bottle hidden behind my back. "Get up," Ray ordered, still holding the gun. "We're going for a ride." I didn't move. Ray approached, nudging me lightly with his foot. As he bent down to pull me up, I suddenly spun around, swinging the beer bottle hard into his head. The bottle shattered. Ray staggered back, blood starting to flow from the wound. I lunged at Ray, pushing him to the ground. The gun fell from Ray's hand, sliding across the floor. We wrestled, both trying to grab the gun. I swung my fist into Ray's face, feeling his nose break under my hand. Ray howled in pain. I snatched the gun and pointed it directly at him. "Don't move." "Calm down, buddy." Ray raised his hands, blood still flowing from his nose and head. "Put the gun down." But I saw calculation in his eyes. "Where are the car keys?" "In my pants pocket. Take them." I moved closer, still keeping the gun pointed at Ray, and searched his pockets. I pulled out the keys, stepping back immediately. I turned and bolted for the door, every step sending jolts of pain through my body. "You're not getting out of here that easily," Ray hissed behind me. Just as I reached the doorknob, I heard a sound. Turning back, I saw Ray pull a knife from his belt and lunge towards me. Without thinking, I raised the gun. My finger tightened on the trigger, but I hesitated. I had never killed anyone, The gunshot echoed. Ray froze, his eyes wide with shock. He staggered, the knife falling to the floor. I gasped for breath, still holding the gun firmly. Ray took a step back, clutching his chest. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but only a choked breath escaped. Then he fell to the floor and lay still. I bolted out of the cabin, running towards the pickup truck. I drove frantically down the dark dirt road, not daring to look back. After about 20 minutes, streetlights appeared ahead. A sign read, Harrisonville Center, 3 miles. I picked up the phone in the truck and dialed 911. I need the police immediately. I just killed someone in self-defense. When the police arrived at the cabin, they found Ray's body and discovered a hidden trapdoor under the floor. Inside, 3 men were tied up, emaciated, but still alive. All delivery drivers who had gone missing from neighboring towns. You didn't just save your own life, you saved 3 others, the detective told me at the hospital, where my wounds were being bandaged. Ray Calloway, the serial killer we've been hunting for 2 years. 2 days later, while recovering in the hospital, I received news that my truck and the robber from that night had been found. The packages inside weren't intact, which didn't surprise me. But luckily, the truck was okay when I got it back. A week later, I was released from the hospital, greeted as a hero at the UPS depot. The company covered all my medical expenses and gave me a long paid leave to recover. I still flinch every time I see a pickup truck on the road, but I learned a valuable lesson. The only way to survive is to trust your own instincts above anything anyone else says or shows. That's why I'm still alive to tell this story.